Good evening. Hope you are all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Yevamos daf Lamed Vav, and we are starting almost halfway down on the Amud. So Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, almost halfway down. Amar Rebbe Lazar Efshar. That's where we're starting from. Yesterday we began a machlokes. We learned the machlokes of Yochanan and Reish Lakish about the status of chalitza when a woman is pregnant. So the case is Reuven is married to Rachel, and Reuven died. Reuven's brother Shimon is now the Yavam, and Rachel is the Yevama. And we find out that she is pregnant, but he had already done chalitza. So does the chalitza count? Rabbi Yochanan says that the chalitza counts, and Reish Lakish says that the chalitza does not count. And that is actually right where we're picking up from in the Gemara. Amar Rebbe Lazar, Efshar Isa lahadar Reish Lakish v'lo tznan la b'mas nisan. How can it be that the shita of Reish Lakish doesn't have a marimakom in the Mishnayos? It has to be that it's rooted in the Mishnayos. Why does it have to be that way? So some of the Meforshim point out is because clearly Rebbe Lazar holds like Reish Lakish. And therefore, he says, if this is the din, it's too basic of a din. Everybody knows that all of Yibum is dependent on whether or not she has children. So if she's pregnant, that should be a major highlight discussion. So therefore, it has to be that there's a Mishnah. So Nafak, he went out, duck, and he searched, Ve'ashkach, and he found the following Mishnah that implied like the Shita of Reish Lakish. Halfway down, it's not. The Mishnah writes, Ha'isha shahalach baila v'tzarasa the Medina Sayam. So a woman who goes to Shahalach Baila, there's a woman in town, her husband and Sarah go on vacation, the Medina Sayam, that can't be fun. Uba'u ve'amru la meis ba'alech. And then people tell her, while your husband was on vacation, he died. Harezu lo tinase velo tisyabein. This woman who was left back in town, she cannot marry, nor can she do yibum ad sheteda shema meuberes hitzarasa. We don't know what the status is of her tzara, and there is no yibum in a case where he has children. So if the tzara ends up producing a child, so then that would mean that there is no yibum status. And then what does she do with all the brothers? So that's really what's going on here, and that's what the Gemara is concerned about. And we're not allowed to. The Gemara says we're not allowed to really do anything. Lo tinase v'lo tisyabim. So says the Gemara, Bishlama yevume lo. I understand why you can't do yibum. The tzara might be pregnant. Shema yehe vlad ben kayama. Maybe the child that the tzara will have will be a viable child, and therefore v'yifka be'isr eshes achdo raisa. And then if you were to do yibum in this case, then you'd be sleeping with your brother-in-law. The only heter of yibum is when there's no children. So the case is like this: Reuven has two wives. He has Rachel and Shoshana, and Reuven and Shoshana go out of town, and then we find out that Reuven dies, but the tzara is still alive. So the two wives are alive, but the husband is dead. When does yibum apply? Only with no children. But we don't know if the tzara is pregnant or not. So therefore, Rachel, cannot do any yibum until we find out what's going on. If she goes and marries Shimon, Reuven's brother, and they sleep together, and then it turns out later that the tzara was really pregnant and had a child, there was no heter yibum. That's eshes ach. That's an isur d'oraisa. So we understand why yibum is not allowed. Why should it be that we're not allowed to do chalitza? Of course, you cannot do chalitza during the 9 months and get married. Hainu safek, because we don't know what the story is going to be down the road with the tzara, whether or not she's going to have a baby. Why can't we have a scenario where we do chalitza now? Chalitza there's no tashmish amita in chalitza. Why can't you do chalitza now? And we'll see what happens with the tzara. If she has a baby and the baby lives for 30 days, great. Then we know that Reuven, that Shimon cannot marry Rachel, or I should say that Rachel cannot marry Shimon. So what do we see from here? We see from here that no chalitza is allowed. That's exactly what Reish Lakish said yesterday. Reish Lakish said that when a woman is pregnant and chalitza is done, we don't even care about the chalitza. The language yesterday was chalitzas meuberes lo shma chalitza. That if a man does chalitza to a woman who's pregnant, it is an irrelevant act. And if we then find out later that taka, there were no children, he has to do chalitza again. The chalitza during that period of time is a zero. And that is implied from this Mishnah. So we started with our Gemara today with Rebbe Lazar, trying to find a marimakom for Reish Lakish, and we have found a subtle hint. It's not blaring, but we found a hint in a Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Uletamech, according to your logic, the Mishnah should have said something else. Tachlos v'tinase la'achar tes. Both the chalitza and the marriage should be done after the 9th month. How do you know that the implication is that you're allowed to do chalitza, that you're not allowed to do chalitza maybe you're allowed to do chalitza during the pregnancy. You just can't marry. The Mishnah doesn't say that. Ella bar mina dehahi. We are not able to learn anything from this Mishnah about Reish Lakish. Why is that? Abaye bar Abba, Rav Chinina bar Abba, Amrei Tarvayu. These two Amoraim, they both said the same thing. Shema Yehev Vlad bar ben Kayama. Maybe really there will be a child born from this man through his tzara. V'nimtza ata matzricha kruz lekehuna. Let's say you do chalitza during the 9 months. And then what's the conclusion? You did chalitza, and then it turns out that that there was a child. So what happens? So if there was chalitza, then what's that woman's status to a kohen? She's a surah to a kohen. If you do chalitza, then that's a chalitza. A kohen's not allowed to marry chalitza. So the case is where, let's say he does chalitza, and then it turns out that the chalitza was unnecessary because a baby was born from the tzara. Then there's no yibum. There's no mitzvah of yibum in that case. So then the Gemara says, we'll have to go back after the chalitza and say, oh, wait, no, it was a mistake. The chalitza that was done was a zero because the tzara had a baby. There was no, even the chalitza was irrelevant. So says the Gemara, then you have to announce, she's back on the Kohen market. It's like on your Jewish dating profile, available to Kohen. So she checked off not available, chalitza, I'm a chalitza girl. And then everything changed. Oh, uncheck the box. So they said, we have to announce to all the Kohanim, Rachel's available because Rachel's tzara had a baby. So Ruvain has a child, which means there's no yibum, the chalitza was a zero. So says the Gemara, it's going to create all this confusion. Says the Gemara, no, big deal. Go make your announcement. Says the Gemara, we can't do that. Why not? Because we're 3/4 of the way down. Maybe there will be people who were there, they witnessed the chalitza, but they did not hear the follow-up announcement that really the tzara had a baby and there was no yibum in the first place. They'll incorrectly say that kashari chalutza the kohen. Look at these lenient rabbis. They've allowed a chalutza to marry a kohen. She's not a chalutza. She's not, because Rachel's tzara had a baby, which means that the whole construct of yibum is not even present or relevant. Doesn't matter. We are afraid of having this chalitza to be done. Therefore, Abaye says we cannot learn anything from this Mishnah.
Is the chalutza also d'oraisa?
No. Chalutza to a kohen is nisur d'rabbanan.
Okay.
But still, it's nisur d'rabbanan. And the child has a status midrabbanan of a halal. It's not good. It's very messy. It's not like a good idea. Like a slice of cheese and a slice of corned beef is also nisur d'rabbanan. It's a very bad idea. We don't mess around like eating unless they're cooked together. It's nisur d'rabbanan. If they're cooked together, that's when all these shilas. We've spoken about this. All the shilas about owning stock in Burger King. All of these shilas are dependent on whether or not they're actually considered cooked first. Everything else is d'rabbanan. So that's why the poskim discussed like there's kulas during the time that we wait after milk and meat. There's kulas for people who are sick. There's kulas for nursing mothers. There's a lot of kulas out there. So the formal isser d'rabbanan of that slice of cheese and slice of meat is 1 hour. The isser d'oraisa is when they're cooked together. After the 1 hour, that's when all of our minhagim come. 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours and a minute, 5.5 hours, 6 hours, 24 hours is the sheet on the Gemara, which we don't hold like obviously, but all of that is all on the minhag side of things. But this is not the kind of isser d'rabbanan that you wanna mess around with. Amar le'abai, midi lo tachlos v'lo tisyabim. Kind of go look back in the brisa that you tried to bring to prove Reish Lakish. It doesn't say lo tachlos. It says lo tinase v'lo tisyabim. Tani, what's implied? Below chalitza. The Mishnah doesn't even speak about chalitza. Aval ichalitzla. If in fact you did chalitza, hachanami desharia. Maybe in fact it would be that it would work out if it ended up being that no baby was born. It's possible. It's a theoretical possibility, but it's not a raya brura for anything about Reish Lakish. Tanya Kavasi de Reish Lakish, we have a brisa that seems to support the shita of Reish Lakish, and let's just remind ourselves that Reish Lakish was of the opinion that chalitzas meuberes lo shma chalitza, that if Shimon does chalitza to Rachel and it turns out that Rachel's pregnant, it is an irrelevant chalitza. Let's see how we can see that in this brisa. Hacholetz lemeuberes v'hipila. If a man does chalitza to a woman who's pregnant and she miscarries, Rachmana litzlan, look what the brisa says. Tzricha chalitza min ha'achid. She needs a new chalitza. Why would she need a new chalitza? She had it already. Elamai, it must be that Reish Lakish is right. Because Reish Lakish said, if you do a chalitza at the 4th month of pregnancy, and then the baby is a nefel, the baby unfortunately passes away, what does the Mishnah say? Go get another chalitza. It didn't count. That is Reish Lakish. And this brisa is a beautiful raya. And we paskin like him, seemingly. Amar Rava hilchasa kavasid de Reish Lakish behanitlas. We paskin like Reish Lakish in 3 cases. The first is ours. Chada, the first one, Hada Amran, this case, that chalitzas meuberes is lo shma chalitza. That if you do a chalitza in the midst of pregnancy, no matter what the conclusion is, there will need to be another chalitza of that, even if that child dies. Or I should say, only if that child dies. There needs to be another chalitza because the baby's alive. There's no need for any chalitza, right? If the baby lives 30 days. So that's what the Gemara says. That's din number one. Idach, what's the second one? 5 lines from the bottom, Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. The second case where we hold like Reish Lakish is as follows. It's not. We know that there is a din of Yerusha. The halacha of Yerusha is, I am your youngest child, Dad, but if you do want to give me a little bit more bank, this Gemara is going to support me a little bit because I'm not your oldest, but he's my oldest brother should get 2x. What?
Does Pishnaim still work?
Pishnaim's a din d'oraisa. But right here, what the Gemara is going to say is, let's say that this case is where the father wants to dole out his inheritance in an abnormal way. So normally it's 2x, x, x, x. That's normally how it works. But here, what the Gemara says is hamachalek nechasav al piv. Instead of doing it according to Torah, if he does by his own volume, riba leechad umiet leechad, he gives more to one child, he gives less to another. Vehishve lahem es habechor, and the older child is treated equally like all of the other siblings. Dvarav kayam. The din is, as long as you don't call it a Yerusha, you call it a matana, you're good to go. So you can give, as a parent, you can give any Yerusha you want to your children, not Yerusha, excuse me, you can give any matana you want to your children. However, the Im Omar Mishum Yerusha, if you say, as a father, I would like to give you a Yerusha, then you have to follow the Torah's formula. 2x, x, x, x. Oldest child gets double, everybody else gets less. So if you say V'im Amar Mishum Yerusha, if you say, because it's like oil and water, I'm going to give you a Yerusha. The youngest child gets the most money. The oldest child doesn't get 2x. The middle child gets 1.5. Totally arbitrary. But you also call it a Yerusha. It's a 0. It's as if you didn't say one word. It's as if the Gemara says Lo Amar Klum. Let's say you write somewhere in your conditions, in addition to saying that it's a Yerusha, you also write that it's Mishum Matana, then Dvarav Kayam, because then you contrasted your Yerusha with a Matana. Says the Gemara, top of Lamed Vav Amud Beis, the Amar Reish Lakish La'olam Lo Kana Ad Sheyomar Ploni Uploni Yarshu Sada Plonis Uplonis Shenasatim Lehem B'Matana V'Yarshu. It has to be that you are explicit. Child X, you get this. Child Y, you get that, with the language of matana, and it has to be specified to each child. It can't be a global comment. Reish Lakish says it has to be a specific comment, and this is the second case where we see that we hold like Rava. Case number 3, Be'idach, the third case is as follows. It's not. Hakosev kol nechasav livno le'achar moso. A person writes all of his property, all the things that he owns, livno, to his son le'achar moso, after he dies. Rashi here highlights something that we wouldn't have thought from the basic phrasing of the Gemara, but Rashi says 8 lines down, Dibur Hamaska le'achar moso, shekasav mehayom u'le'achar mitzah, ve'ein le'av bahen el achilas peiros b'chayav. The halacha is that if a father says from today until after I die, and he says, I'm giving you everything, then the father he no longer has rights to the principle of what he gave away. He only has the fruits of. So if a father says, I'm giving you the orchard, we mark how many fruits are on the tree as of day X, and all payros can go to the father still, but not the principle. The orchard is no longer his. So that's what the Mishnah says here. Hakosev kol nechasav livno la'achar moso, ha'av eino yachol limkor mipnei shenosnan leven. He's not allowed to sell sell what he gave to his kid. He can't sell it to anybody else because he already gave it to his son. They're in some ways they're partners. Machar ha'av, if in fact the father did break the rule and he tried to sell the orchard, so then mechurin ad sheyamus hu, then the payros, that which the father had as a benefit, that's all he can sell because it's all that's exclusively his. So let's say this again. The father says, from today until the day I die, I'm giving you my orchard. So the din is that at that moment, the father only has rights to the orchard, and the child can restrict his father from, the father only has rights to the payros of the orchard, and the son can restrict his father from selling the principal. So the machar ha'av, if in fact the father does sell things, mechur not shiyamosu, then the payros, the extras, what goes beyond the principal, can be sold, but only until the day he dies. Machar haben ein lokech klum ad shiyamusaf. He gets nothing. If the child tries to sell it, because the child has no rights other than the principal and can't sell the principal because it's co-owned by his father, so then ein lokech klum, the buyers get nothing until the death of the father. The Itmar, the Amoraim say about this Mishnah, Machar haben b'chaye ha'av. Let's say the son tried to sell things in the life of the father, and then umeis haben b'chaye ha'av, and then the son dies before the father, a complicated case. Rav Yochanan Amar Lo Kana Lokeach. That is not a kinyan. Reish Lakish Amar Kana Lokeach. There is a kinyan. What is their argument about? Rav Yochanan Amar Lo Kana Lokeach, because kinyan peiros ki kinyan haguf dami. The reason why this doesn't work is because the peiros, which is beyond the principle, and the actual orchard itself are treated like one kinyan. Reish Lakish Amar Kana Lokeach. The reason why there is a kinyan here is because kinyan peiros lav ki kinyan haguf dami. We do distinguish. We separate the purchase of the orchard itself from the peiros, and there is some type of quasi purchase here. These are the three cases in which we paskin like Reish Lakish. Our case, that chalitzas meuberes is lo shma chalitza, the case of Yerusha, where a father is allowed to break the rules of Yerusha by calling it a matana and specifying to each child what they're getting, even if it's out of age order. And this third case about selling a field together. That brings us to a third of the way down, Lamed Vav, Amud Beis. Let's continue. We had said in our Mishnah that Ein Havlad Shel Kayama, we were talking about this case, that if the child doesn't exist, v'chule. Says the Gemara, against our Mishnah, Tana Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Amru Yotzi Beget. Whereas in our Mishnah, in this case, if the child doesn't survive, our Mishnah said they can be Yakayim, they can stay married. Rabbi Eliezer doesn't agree with our Mishnah, and he says that they need a get. Omar Rava, this is agreed upon by two people. It's agreed upon by Rav Meir, Rabbi Lazar, Amru Davar Echad. This Rabbi Eliezer from one line up, who says that even if the child dies, there needs to be a get. Seemingly, Rav Meir and Rabbi Eliezer both say the same thing. Rabbi Eliezer Hade Amran. That's the brisa right here, where he says that if in fact there is, even if the child dies, that we require a get. What's Rav Meir's Mari Makom? How do we know that Rav Meir agrees that we would need a get in this case? Because Tanya, a brisa, connected, I guess, but it's very different than our case. Tanya, the brisa writes, Lo yisa adam uberes chaveru menekes chaveru. Let's say that there's a friend, and the friend passes away, and his wife is either a meuberes or a menekes. She's either pregnant or she's nursing. You should not marry her. V'im nasa, and if in fact you do marry her, that's not right. Yotzi v'lo yachzer olam estevi Rav Meir. You're not allowed to marry her. You have to divorce her, and you can never marry her again. V'chachamim omrim yotzi, that they have to get divorced. U'lechashayagia zmano lichnos yichnos. Once they reach the point, as Rashi points out, of 24 months, that's how long this restriction is. The reason why we learned, I think yesterday we learned this, is that we're concerned about the weaning of a child too early that may lead to his death. Again, we don't have these issues nowadays because I did a bris this morning. She's not nursing at all. Yeah, whatever the difficulties were, they're just bottle feeding. So we have totally different issues. I took one of my kids to the doctor today for a little bit of a stomach issue. And do you use this kind of formula? Did you use that kind of formula? Nutramigen, and all the different types of whole different world. But in the times of the Gemara, weaning a child too early was very dangerous. They didn't have what to supplement. Cow's milk. I mean, we don't give cow's milk to babies at this age. So what did they give? They needed breast milk. That's what they need. A wet nurse. It's a whole big complication. So the Kitzur Nimratz, we had to wait 24 months. Amar le Abaye, Mimai, how do you know that this din of Rav Meir in the brisa of marrying his friend who unfortunately passed away, of marrying his wife during the 24 months, how do you know that that's comparable to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that in our case, he needs to divorce this woman even if the child is born? The cases are not identical. Dil Malohi, maybe they really are not comparable. Maybe you cannot say that Rav Meir and Rabbi Eliezer are on the same page. Because Ad Kan Lo Kama Rabbi Eliezer Hacha, Rabbi Eliezer in our case is only saying what he's saying, so strict, because you're very, very close. You are on the precipice of sleeping with someone that's an Isser Doraisa of Eishasach. That's why in our case, we're going to be super strict. Aval Hasam Dirabanan. There, the whole concern about the 24 months and the weaning a child, yes, it's scary. Maybe it's scary, but the whole din is a din Dirabanan. I'm not saying you should do it. It's still an Isser Dirabanan. It's a bad idea. You might kill the baby. But Lidina, it's not a din Doraisa. So maybe Kirabanan Svirale, maybe he'd hold like the Rabbanan in our case. The Rabbanan in our case are more lenient. Inami, another reason why Rav Meir and Rabbi Eliezer might not be on the same page is because 2/3 of the way down, Ad Kan Lo Ka'amar Rabbi Meir Hasam Elamishum de Rabbanan V'chachamim Asu Chizuk L'Divrei Yosim Mishal Torah. Sometimes the rabbis have to put their foot down more than what's said in Chumash. You have to, it's public policy. Like if people take a course in public policy, you have to think about policies that work for the people. We have this in halacha as well. In gozer al tzibur, elim ken tzibur cholam lamod ba. So sometimes Chazal had to be more machmir than what we would have thought would have been the case by a din d'oraisa because the derabanan, someone's going to mess around and make a mistake. So says the Gemara, maybe over here, by the case of the friend who passed away, his wife was pregnant, maybe you're not going to be makbid enough. We're going to take it the extra mile. And what's going to be the din? Super strict, you're never allowed to marry her again. Aval hacha midoraisa, but in our case, when we're dealing with a din deoraisa, paga be'eshes chavero or paga be'eshes ach, where you could literally violate an isser deoraisa by being with her, mifrash parshemina. There, we don't need such a strong. Everybody knows it's a big isser deoraisa. You don't need to put up a sign. Please don't sleep with someone else's spouse. Everybody knows what the din is. It's not a shaila. We have enough dine deoraisa that are padding around that. We have yichud, and you have so many isurim you have to violate before you get to that. But by din derabanan, there is no padding. So maybe it's just asu chizik l'divrei yosir mishal Torah. So therefore, there's no raya brura that Rav Meir holds like Rabbi Eliezer one way or the other. The Gemara continues its analysis of our Mishnah. Amar Rava uladivrei chachamim yotzia beget. We had said that according to the chachamim, they actually need a get. Amar Mar Zutra dekanami. This makes sense. Diktani yotzi v'loktani yafrish shma mina. Had it been that we would have thought that they just have to separate from one another during this period of time, so then we might have thought that it just means that they have to, it's like taking a separation. We're separated. No, you have to actually get divorced. It's not just stam. You live in different houses. Shma mina. One more sugya for the night. It'll take us until the two dots, about 15 lines down on Lamed Zayin. But Aleph, let's continue. Amar le Rav Ashi le Rav Hoshaya berei de Rav Idi. Hasam, we have a Mishnah. Tnan. Is it a Tnan or a Tanya? It's a Tanya. Hasam Tanya. We have a Brisa, and this Brisa is quoted in Maseches Shabbos daf Kuf Lamed Hey. Ooh, and on daf Pei over there. Okay, fine. So we've learned this before. Rashbag Omer. Kol sheshaha be'adam lamed yom eino nefel. Any child that lives for 30 days is not a nefel. What's the inference from that? Halo shaha sfeika have. If a child doesn't live that long, they live 20 days, that is considered a sfeika as to whether or not that's a leda. It's not our standing assumption. We typically assume that less than 30 is not a bar kayama, and 31 is a bar kayama. But in the Gemara's inference from this brisa, it's a suffix. What do the Amoraim say about this brisa? Itmar. Itmar is always a word that introduces an Amoraic comment. Meis b'soch lamed yom. Let's say that a child, Rachmana litzlan, dies within 30 days on day 20. And the mother is ve'amda v'niskacha. Now, she really should not be doing this because we are afraid that she might still have some type of zika to the initial husband. If there is a suffix about this child being a bar kayama, then there's also a suffix about whether or not she has a din of yibum. What did she do? 5 lines from the Gemara, ve'amda v'niskacha. So what do we do now? Ravina mishmei de Rava Amar, im eshes Yisrael hi choletzes. If the guy that she married, again, it wasn't the Yavam, she married a random guy. If the guy she married was a Yisrael, then let's just do chalitza to cover all of our bases. Because if the baby is if the baby is actually not considered to be a bar kayama and chalitza was required, no problem. Problem solved. Good. What if she's married to a Kohen? Well, if she's married to a Kohen, the chalitza will cause some very, very damaging issues for the marriage because then they have to get divorced. So therefore, because we're dealing with a suffix, v'im eshes Kohen hi eina choletzes. That is a big kula that we would say that if she is if she's married to a Kohen, we don't even require the chalitza. We allow the suffix to ride out, and we assume that there is no halachic concern. Rav Mesharshia Mishmei Rava Amar Achazu v'Achazu choletzes. What kind of ridiculous question is that? A Kohen cannot be married to a chalitza. So therefore, if you're concerned enough that when she marries a Yisrael that he needs to do chalitza, you should be equally concerned when she's married to a Kohen, even if it has bad results. Yes, that happens sometimes, but you shouldn't have done what you did. This woman should not have gone to say available for marriage, even for a Kohen. You made a mistake. So therefore, whereas the first shita here, Ravina says that we don't do chalitza in the case of where she's married to a Kohen, Rav Mesharshia says that we do. Amar le Ravina, the Rav Mesharshia. Ravina says to Rav Mesharshia, I don't really disagree with you, but Orta Amar Rava Hachi. At night, when Rava first taught this last night in the Beis Medrash, he said what you said. Ubitzafra hadarbe. And in the morning, he actually changed his mind. Rashi, ulitzafra hadarbe, v'shamati mipiv she'ena choletzes. I heard him say eina choletzes. So in this case, let's review the case. The baby dies, Rachmana litzlan, on day 20 from birth. He is a suffix nefel. If he's a Safek Nefel, she's a Safek Yevama. And then she does something wrong and she goes and gets married to a Kohen. Do we need Chalitza or not? Machlokes Amoraim. So says the Gemara, Amar Le, Sharisu, you're going to be lenient here. Hey Rava, the Tishtaru Aftarba. Can you do me a favor? While you're throwing the Torah out, can you also please make the fats on that animal kosher? They probably taste great. Little tongue in cheek, a little bit of a bite. Why are you being so lenient? Anyways, the question comes up like this, based on this Gemara. 3 lines down, Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. Hacha, gabe meuberes chaver menekes chavero, hanasua lekohen. Let's say that this woman who is a meuberes chavero, all right, so she is the friend who died. This is his wife. She's pregnant and or nursing, or she's pregnant or nursing, and she's married to a Kohen during those 24 months. Do we extend the same leniencies of not forcing them to divorce? Yes or no? If she's married to a Kohen, do we have to go through the same route that we went through before, or can we use some leniencies? These 2 cases, how can you possibly compare them? The case of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel of a Safek Nefel, and the case of this woman who is a Meuberes Chavero or Menekes Chavero. There, at least there's a dissenting opinion by Rab Shimon ben Gamliel in the case of Sveika. He says it's a Safek, but the Rabbanan hold the Amre Afal Gav Delosha Vlad Me'al Have. It is considered a Vlad. So then Gabe Eshes Kohen Kevan Delo Afshar Abdin and Kerabanan. We don't have an option. We don't want to break up their marriage if we can, and therefore we can hold like the sheet of the Rabbanan. All is well and good. The baby is considered to be a Vlad. Therefore, there is everything is fine. Everything is perfect. We're good to go. Aval hacha, but here in the case of the Meuberes Chavero, Kiman Navid, who do you want to hold like? Rab Meir. If you want to say that we should hold like Rab Meir, well, he's strict. Ha'amar Yotzi v'lo Yachzir Lamis. We saw that on the bottom of Lamed Vav Amud Beis. V'kirabanan Hamrei beget, one way or the other, they have to get divorced. So the Gemara ends without clarifying this case and basically saying that these 2 cases are not comparable. The case of Rashbag, where he speaks about the Safek Nefel, and the case of the Meuberes Chavero, those 2 cases are not similar. One last case to bring us to the 2 dots, and then we'll stop. Says the Gemara Itmar, Kidsha Besoch Shlosha Ubarach. Let's say that they were halachically betrothed within 3 months of her having been married to someone else, Ubarach, and then he ran away. Bad husband. But what do we do? So it says, what? I'm going to judge him. I am just going to judge him. Yeah. But let's see what he does in the Gemara. I will let the Gemara tell the story. Right? A little cheating. Says the Gemara, Pligi baravacha v'rafram. This is a machlokes. Some say we should put him into cherem. This is one of the tools that we use to prevent agunos, is that we put someone into cherem. This whole big debate. We've heard these stories in Brooklyn and wherever. They sent a group of Yiddish thugs to go break this guy's knees to give his wife a divorce. That's a big shaila in halacha, whether or not that's actually a divorce. That could be called a get me'usa. A get me'usa is a get that is basically forced. And the Rambam has this language of kofen osoad sheteitze nafsho, that we even beat the guy until the point that he's close to death, because there we say really ratzon of the Baal, his neshama wants to do mitzvos. Okay, his goof is a behemoth. He's a rush on the outside, but he still has a Yiddish neshama. The poskim discuss this, and they don't allow for the beating of people. I'll say b'fem alei, please don't beat people to get out of aguna situations. One of the best ways to prevent aguna situations is to have couples sign a prenup. The RCA's prenup, the prenup that's out there, the standard text, or by first use, it's a different text. Everyone should be signing a prenup. For the few weddings that I've had the opportunity to do, or the burden to do, I don't know which one, I always make the couple sign a prenup. I make sure it's notarized. I send it into the RCA. 0 cases of aguna when there's a prenup, because it's legally binding, halachically and in court, that the husband is obligated, the recalcitrant husband is obligated to pay X number of what? Recalcitrant. Art scroll uses the word actually, but that's what an aguna is. It's he's a jerk is the simple English term. It's not so friendly, but these people are not nice. They're trapping their spouses. So anyways, the way that the prenup works is it basically forces the husband to pay. It's not an outrageous amount of money. I thought it was $500, but I recently looked. I think it's $150 per day. What?
No, I'm trying to find your word.
It's not my word.
If you look in the dictionary, it's right on the project.
Haven't lost a step. So says the Gemara, So the first shita says, what do we do with this guy? He ran away from the altar. Harat Mikudeshesli gives her the ring and then he bolts. They're not married yet. They're partially married. It's only Kedushin. So the Chadamar, no, his intentions are actually not bad. Iruke mistaye, the fact that he ran away, it tells us what he's doing. He's waiting until the time that he's actually allowed to marry her because she's within her 3 months. He's going to come back. That's the assumption of the Gemara within the Shita. And Hava Uvda, there actually was a story like this. Taka, the Amar, Luhu Rafram, don't worry. Iruke mistaye. She's not really trapped. He's going to come back after 3 months. We'll stop right here and Amir Hashem pick up tomorrow with Daf Lamed Zayin. Wishing you all a beautiful night.